At dinner, a couple of Crips mess up a blood, and there's a altercation. And the head cop comes to me and he says, Bob, I'm sorry, but this is no good. This is not good. And I saw my life flashing before me, my very first video. I was going to shut down. And I said, I'll tell you what, officer, give me one shot. And only because, I believe, only because he and the cops wanted to see Michael Jackson perform, did he say, okay, you got it, one take.
Welcome to the first episode of OGs and Aunties, where we spotlight iconic creatives in their second act, proving that creativity doesn't come with an expiration date. It's an honor and a privilege to introduce our guests on our very first OG and Aunties episode. I would like to introduce Hall of Famer, legendary film and music video director, and one of the best commercial directors ever, whose body of work that not only has left an impression in the hearts and minds of many, but has reached cultural iconic status. We're talking like Michael Jackson's Beat It video and one of my all-time uh, ad campaigns, the original Miller Lite All-Star campaign. Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, I'd like to introduce you to Mr. Bob Giraldi. Hey, Bob.
Hi there. Well, thank you for that, Lewis.
I'm your hype man today. It was just so really great, man. It's just we've done so much work together, and I just looking at your body of work, and it's fantastic. Now, Bob, when I was thinking about when I did this, came with this idea of this podcast, I said, who's going to be my first guest? Who's the best one to kick this off? And what I always loved about you, and you've been this way your entire career, is that you're very experiential. You always push the envelope. You always look for something fresh, and you value authenticity. And you still are that person today, for all these years we've been doing this. So let's talk a little bit about that. You've always been, because real quick story, I remember we were shooting, the Underground Railroad Freedom Center work we did.
Sure do.
And the spot we shot with the black kid going in the Asian market, you know, and I remember you put like a little, do rag on his head, and you said, "I'm going to shoot this in black and white." I was like, "Oh, Bob, can we shoot it in color? And that way, if somebody asks, why did you shoot it in black and white? I could go to color." You're like, "No, Lewis, no, 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 no. This is what it needs to be." And I was so scared, man. But you always push the envelope like that. So just talk about that. How you feel like always want to stay fresh.
Well, uh, being in a business of copycats, which is really what our business turned out to be, the television commercial business over the years is so much inspired by what has run before and what's been successful. I and being in an agency for most of my adult life before I became a film director, I just saw around me so many people that weren't original. And yet you're in a business where your originality is the king or the queen. You want it to be unique and different for for good reasons, strategic. It only benefits a brand, then a client, and then an agency, and then a production company. So it works its way down, but it never seemed to me when I was in that agency position that people pushed it. The fear that you experienced is exactly the fear that got me thinking, I don't belong in this business behind the desk or in these meetings any longer. I belong in this business someplace else. And when I became a director, I always tried to take even a conversation between the two of us, make it around somehow a little different. So people could say, wait a minute, I haven't seen that before. And that's something that I try to instill in the students that I work with to this day, is that the mark of a director is not only to tell a story, but to tell it in a way that nobody else has heard it before or
Mm-hmm.
seen it before.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it bears me out when we look at the best work that's being done annually. Um, it's usually work that you haven't quite seen before. It's rarely work that's derivative. So I couldn't help but look at the new Nike campaign, which has got everybody in a buzz. Now it's why do it rather than the years and years of just do it.
Mm-hmm.
And so many people don't like it, but I do because it's very much about choice now rather than about results. And that alone, I think, is a tremendous step in the right direction for them. But that's an agency and a client that both together thrive on originality. And if you're going to be original, go all the way and be as successful, as daring, and as dramatic as Nike has been over the years. And to this day, we point to Nike, I mean, along with Volkswagen and maybe some other brands, but we always point to Nike as the height of that climb up that mountain that we face every day.
Mm-hmm. Bob, you touched on some questions I was going to ask you, but while we're there, let's talk a little bit about how you became who you are. So take me back to your teen years, growing up Patterson, New Jersey. If I'm not, is Patterson, New Jersey, is that where you grew up?
Patterson, New Jersey.
Okay, so who you are had to start there. So can you talk a little bit like what led you to get into this business in the first place?
I was a young athlete in Patterson, and I played basketball and baseball. And somehow it got me a scholarship to college. I was on my way to Wagner College in Staten Island, New York. Um, and I got a letter from the athletic director, right, a little before I was to start, saying, "Welcome, we think you're going to be terrific. However, it appears to us that your aptitude in art and the tests that you've taken is off the charts, is pretty good. My brother, as it turns out, just so happens to be a recruiter for for perhaps the best art school on the East Coast, Pratt Institute in Brooklyn. And at the same time, they're looking for some athletes. They want to upgrade their athletic program. The Michelangelo trip.
Mm-hmm.
You don't have to be, you could be an athlete, you could be you could be fitter, and still be an artist. And so I talked it over with my family and I said, hey, I've always had that ability to draw and whatever art was to me in those days. Let me take a shot at this. And I went, I joined, I said goodbye to Wagner and hello to Pratt. And I found myself in trouble because I had to play ball. I was forced to play ball for 4 years. And you don't want to play, you don't want to run up and down the court a gazillion times and leave at 9 o'clock and go have dinner and then go home and be creative. That just doesn't work for the body. So I struggled, but I got through it. And my life took on I stopped playing ball. I stopped the dream of being a Major League Baseball player. And I went on to unknown waters in those days. Louis, for me, luck and timing have always been my friend. I've
Hmm.
been I mean, I wish to God I keep that up, but up to this point, luck and timing have always been my pal. And just at that time, as I entered into the art direction or assistant art direction category at Young and Rubicam or Della Femina Travisano or the two agencies that I went to, television advertising was just replacing print advertising as the countries or the world's, you know, du jour of what to go, where to, you know, look at this new. Oh my God! Look, you see that commercial? Oh my, oh, you know, that was beginning, and I was at the beginning of that. And one of the original Mad Men, actually, I was, you know, I mean, I know the character of Don Draper was based on George Lois, a man that I have total respect for, who was probably the greatest or most high profile art director, agency art director ever. But it just, you know, it was timing. Had I not been there at that time, I don't know whether I would have gone into television or into the film, you know. So it's a little bit of luck for most people. You have to have a little bit of that, you know.
Mhm. So, Bob, you talked about it's interesting. So, you start out as an art director, okay, that's cool. And you say, I want to direct. And you touched on a little bit. You say, when the fear I had is like, okay, you want to get out of that and go to the other side, which is great. So, what was that moment that convinced you, like, okay, I really have to go? Did it something happen in an agency, or you just saw something and you were like, okay, that's it. I'm going to be a director now?
I was at Della Femina working with really one of the unheralded giants of the industry, in my opinion, Jerry Della Femina,
Mhm.
and as a writer, agency owner, and my classmate at Pratt, Ron Travasano, who was his partner. So I left Y&R to go there because they wanted me to be in charge of whatever we did. And there was a campaign that we did together for ABC Eyewitness News that was also just starting. There was no Eyewitness News then. It was just forming itself.
Uh-huh.
And H&R Block, of all places, that didn't run advertising at all. They had nothing to say. You know, all they were a pain in the butt. You know, we'll do your taxes. And Jerry and I got on a train to go to a client meeting. I'll never forget. And in that train ride to Philadelphia, we came up with a campaign for H&R Block. And when we were done, and the client loved it, I love it, I love it, shoot it, do it, thank you. He had no idea what he was getting into. I said to Jerry, you know, why don't I take a shot at casting this? And I have an idea. I have a feeling for who the characters are. There was a little bit of a Goomba commercial and, you know, sort of dark characters, unlike what advertising was, smiley and happy and positive. You know, taxes aren't very positive. So let me try what I can come up with. Would you mind if I got together a crew and whatever and directed it? And Jerry, because it would have worked at Young Rubicam or
Uh-huh.
at any large agency. Jerry said, "Sure, I have no idea what you're talking about, but go ahead and do it." And we went ahead and did it. And I put together, I remember looking at a camera for the first time in my life, and it was a big black box, unlike what we see today. And I said, "Where's the lens? I can't find the lens." You know, it was a learning process, but I did it. And I familiarized myself with some of the best comic actors in New York at the time. And I realized, hey, this is cool. This is really cool. I think I could sort of like this life. And there's the beginning of a life. You know, it was positive. That campaign went on to win at Clio's and win most awards at the shows. It was original. It was different. It was funny and funky. So um, a little bit of success, unexpected, timing, luck, and some talent. And there we have the beginning of a life.
Of life. It's interesting, So, well, okay, what happened? When did you get to the point? Okay, like, okay, you came out the box with great success. Okay, really great. Okay. And it had a lot to do with talent, a little luck, but okay, here's the deal. When did you get to that point when you looked around and say, I belong here? You know what I mean? It's like, okay, you look around, you see the other directors that exist, and you had the confidence and you have a body of work, you've done enough things to say, I need, I deserve to sit in this director chair with all these other people.
That's a great question because in my case, it actually uh, makes more sense than in a lot of other cases. First of all, Louis, I don't think we directors ever feel we belong. That's
Okay.
one of the things about being a director. You're always in competition with better people. Sometimes not as good, but oftentimes better. Well, my story of H&R Block and then Eyewitness News that followed, and I think a campaign that followed that, was me working as a director in an agency. Now it was time to get off the pot and go become a film director or stay in the agency and direct my own work. And I had one too many of those meetings where clients, not knowing what they were talking about, spouted on and on about something they knew nothing about. I said, enough, enough. Thank you very much. It's been nice. It's been fun. I need to now try a different path with that talent or that desire that I just, came upon. And I said, I'm going to be a director. And I searched and talked to plenty of reps for production companies in New York in the early days, and nobody wanted me. Some said I would never make it. I wasn't good enough. It was I was nobody. Yes, I had an award-winning campaign. I did that in the um, agency, but nobody wanted to put me on their roster. Um, One guy stepped up, and his name was Bob Gordon, and he was a rep for at that time and to this day probably the best tabletop director ever, a man named Elbert Buden, who is no longer alive. But in those days, he was brilliant. And Gordon had this production company called Buden, whatever. And he said, let me take a chance with some young guy that maybe we do a little live action on the side and I can make some more money, whatever. So he took a chance. And I left the agency business and I went over all the way on the west side by the Holland Tunnel, by the Lincoln Tunnel, and sat in my office for a year without doing a job. And I
Hmm.
doodled in a book. And every phone call I made to whatever old client I knew or old agency people I knew or my agency at Della Famina or my agency at Young and Rubicam didn't want to know anything. No, sorry. And I had a reel that was quite good, but they just all passed me by. So I doodled in that book for a year until 1 year later, Delafamina's agency Jerry called and said, Bob, I got this strange campaign for a product called Oxidol. And I always remember, I never forget the name because it's so unique a name. I guess it was a detergent, no longer on the market. And he said, I got an actor, a comedian who's a little nuts, but I think he'd be funny. Dom DeLuise. You want to put the two together and can we do some things? And that was the beginning of my real life. That was it. I said, thanks, Jerry. And yes, I'd love to. And from that day on, for about 25 years, I didn't stop working ever. So
Wow. Wow, Bob, that's wow, that's great. To hear, it's really nice. Hopefully we'll get younger people, some young folks listen to that, and your story is just much like theirs today. And that whole 1 year you sat there just waiting, but you didn't give up hope. You know what I mean? You were waiting, and then that break came, and you was ready for it. That was great. So, Bob, you always had some street swag to you. You know what I mean? It's like you always, and as now I'm here for the first time, you were an athlete and stuff like that. You do have this swag. Is that what made you different from everybody else? Because you got an edge to you. I like that. So how you separate yourself style wise from all the other folk?
well, that's hard to talk about, obviously, Lewis, because but swag comes from Jersey. It's a Jersey swag. There's a New York swag. There's a Bronx swag. There's a Chicago swag. It's a little bit of that. Don't forget, Patterson, my hometown, begat Lou Costello, the swag comedian of the 50s, um, and Larry Doby, who had, broke that color barrier in the American League for the Indians.
Hmm.
It was a lot of swag in his gentleness. Um, I don't know. It just was who I am. And, as when an agency guy once said, whenever you see Bob, you see a whole party of people behind him. You know, I don't know if that's true, but I guess enough of it was that, yeah, it's a personality thing. And as you get older, you get cut back on it, obviously. But it served me well then. And honestly, Louis, there's another thing. We directors in those days had to protect ourselves
Hmm.
because coming at us, I mean, I know you had your issues, obviously, as a creative director and head of an agency and in a defined market, trying to break out and do something that at least made some sense. But you're talking to people who don't hear sense, that don't hear logic, that are only fearful for that if their next commercial doesn't deliver results that are off their charts, they're in trouble. And that's a hell of a way to go through life.
Mm.
And I always found that pathetic. I always found that not very attractive. That grown men, in those days it was mostly men, but it was at Young and Rubicam, there was plenty of women, certainly in the production
Hmm.
department. Everybody was afraid to fail. And if being afraid to fail, as an ex-athlete, Lewis, if you're afraid to fail, you can't succeed. It will not ever, it doesn't compute. So I needed to get past that. And I guess my way of getting past it was to have a bit of swag.
Okay, that'll serve you well, Bob. Okay, let's switch gears a little bit. You know what? Again, on the shoots with you, you always been that teacher, and you've been involved with the School of Visual Arts for a long time, and you're the chair of the School of Visual Arts Masters in Film program, right? So directing program. So, Bob, today, how are you preparing your students? I mean, when you're thinking about, we got Stephen out earlier was talking about the AI and people directing kind of things on the AI, and how are you preparing them for this new world that they kind of stepping into right now?
Well, that's another relevant question, and especially for young people that are serious about going into the arts and specifically going into film. Um, I First of all, culture and AI are combusted. They're at each other. We're not going to lose AI for any time soon. Everything is going to. I mean, I see more. You can't watch television. You can't watch your computer without something referring to AI. As a filmmaker, I welcome AI in our program, and I tell our students all I need is when you AI plays an important role or a larger part than just editing, you let me know. You tell me. You tell the instructors that, oh, yes, I use the help of AI. But you could do whatever you want with AI. You decide to make a film, a short film, only using AI, that's going to be your issue. And you're going to find out that it's not quite cracked up to be what you think it is, but go ahead. And you will, are you going to go out in that world and say, here I am, an AI director? I'll tell a story, but only through AI. Okay. If your characters and your emotion are going to be crafted technically by AI, have at it. So I take on a different tack than a lot of the instructors who are fine artists at the school who are up in arms with AI because it obviously attacks their work. It's on, the internet. There it is for AI to grab, take, use, steal, whatever, imitate. Um, I don't have that problem. Film doesn't have that problem. You know, I asked my daughter, who's applying now to graduate school, do you use AI? No, there's a 20 something young woman who says, yeah, of course I do. Whenever I write an application or an essay that's 100 words and it has to be 75, I say, hey, how do AI help me? How do I get it down? So it's an editor. Okay, I have no problem with it, as many people do. However, like a lot of things, it saturates our mind and emotions immediately. And there it's not going to change. So I want those students to understand, yes, you can use it. B, let's not be obsessed by it. Use it correctly. If you need help, we'll help you. And please identify it if you do, because it is a partner. And it becomes your partner. I want to know who your partner is. You know, you have to give credit to a screenwriter. You have to give credit to an actor. You have to give credit to a DP. So why not give credit to your technical help?
Wow,
So,
wow, that's great. Oh man, that's
and they seem to embrace it. Now, keep in mind, Louis, I
mhm.
also have majority of my students are international, and
Hmm.
many are from China, who are light years ahead of the American students when it comes to technology. Light years. It's not even close. They come already with the knowledge and the experience of having dabbled in all of it, which is fascinating for an American filmmaker.
Wow, wow, Bob, I didn't know that. I mean, that was you got a lot of gems in that.
Yep,
Now we talked about culture, and it's sort of like culture has become this big thing now, right? I got a good friend of mine, Marcus Collins. He wrote a book on it called "For the Culture." He's speaking every day about it to organizations and stuff. But culture has always been there, Bob. I mean, really, right? It's not new. It's sort of like marketers are sort of marketing it almost now,
yep,
right? And but I think you've always been tapping into culture just because of who you were and how you saw life.
yep. And that's basically how I would define. I would like that to maybe be on my grave. How I saw life. I direct as I see life, rather than imitate. I'm not an imitator. I like to play on what I see. Um, Culture for me, Lewis, is not a culture war. Culture for me is beautiful art, interesting theater, music. That's culture. Manners, that's culture to me. The other culture, the civilization culture, is in trouble. And we have got, I mean, not to get political, but we've gone too far. And we've now put not only culture, but democracy at risk where we are today. There's no question about it. And what we're going to do about it, that's also disappointing because we don't seem to be doing anything or anything smart or thorough, about it. So we could end up in trouble. But that's just an opinion from an elder, a senior citizen, who watches and reads and feels as I do. Um, a quick story. I was uptown on 77th Street, 80th Street last week. I was in the city, and I took a subway ride back down to Tribeca, where I have my loft. Patty and I have a loft in Tribeca. So that's about a half an hour subway ride with many stops. And I was thinking about us getting together and speaking. And I was looking around, and the car was really full. And it was full of every shade of color you could imagine. And everybody seemed to be on their phone, which is not a phenomenon, certainly on a subway. Most people seemed to have something in their ears. And most people, while they seemed to be at peace with themselves, were really quite aware of who was around them. And I said to myself, talk about civilization. This is civilization right now, today in New York City. I have no idea about Idaho and Iowa and all those places which I care not to visit anyway. I I know and care about New York. And that ride was so serene, so quiet, so positive, and everybody, no one was hateful. No one was at a culture war. No one was going to get in and say, you don't deserve to be here. You don't belong here. Get away from me. You, whatever it was. And in so many different places were represented. In fact, I counted 3 Caucasians in the whole subway, and it was just a beautiful ride. And to me, I wish we had a little more of those rides.
Yeah, I like that. Baba, it's just been a pleasure to work with you, and I've learned so much. And when I was at Burrell, and the people that work with you, they would come to say, "Well, thank you for the opportunity to work with Bob." So what I want to talk about is watching you was like a class in itself, and it's 3 things I picked up from you. Number one, you cast like a demon. Man, you got an eye for casting like crazy. And of course, number two, your narrative and storytelling skills. I mean, you can tell a story like nobody's business. And third, how you handle celebrities. I mean, it's like celebrities can be intimidating. And I remember, I won't say this person's name, but I remember we was working, and I don't think that celebrity showed up as prepared as they could have. And you leaned into them. It's like, hey, wait a minute, you come here to work. And then I just love those things about you, right? And so I want to talk about 3 pieces of work that I want you to kind of elaborate on. Now, the first one is my all-time favorite, the Miller Lite All-Stars campaign. We retired athletes, and it's so funny for the young folks when you think about culture. Bob Euchre must be in the front row. That line was a part of culture, right? I mean, people would say that. Oh, I must be in the front row. Madden, coach for the Raiders. Now, Madden is one of the most popular video games ever, which is a part of culture.
Yes, very much so.
Yeah, and now knowing that you like a former athlete yourself and everything, I mean the casting, because how do you feel about the casting was great, but they're athletes. How do you feel about how athletes are portrayed in work today that you see? Because these guys weren't actors, right? You had to.
No, they were. They might have been hams, but they weren't actors.
Uh-huh.
Um, Interesting. I watched a little football yesterday, and before that, I watched the women's final tennis match. It was marvelous. And I watch. I'm not from the generation that watches a computer or streaming. I watch my streaming, but watch on my television. And I couldn't see more than 2 commercials before a celebrity popped up. And I was raised in the environment where that wasn't true.
Mhm.
That wasn't possible. Well, I was remember being one of the first. I was number 2 actually. Bob Fosse was number 1, who did a commercial for Broadway show. Bob did Pippin, and then my turn came, and I was given the opportunity to do a chorus line. And they hated a director showing up on their one day off to come in and do a commercial for their show. They just had no use for marketing. And to this day, you can't put on a Broadway show without enormous budget for marketing. So it's completely changed. But I remember when it wasn't all that popular. Um, and then uh, in those days, it was McCann Erickson first, and they had the Miller Lite account. They did, I think, two or three commercials first, and then they had Dick Butkus, a
Mhm.
real ruffian, who had no idea to be an actor, had no chops for being an actor, and they wanted me to do something with him, and I did. And then they said, "Oh, this guy, he knows what he's doing a little bit." And then they called me to do Bubba Smith, but it's the easy opening can, you know.
Yeah.
Um, and I became friendly with the creative team, and they realized that I had the ability to get from athletes some kind of performance. Now, the trick for me was personality. Get them to be personable, get them to be beyond themselves. Do not expect them to be subtle. Do not expect them to tap into acting class experience of how to deal with the many emotions. There's only one emotion in the Miller Lite campaign, and that's personality. Here's my personality, and here's what the situation is, but here's my personality, and let's have a go at it. And it's worked for me tremendously. And I did, it ended up, and to this day, I ended up doing 90% of the Miller Lite campaign. And I noticed recently where they attempted to go back to resurrect it with Luke Wilson and whatever, and it fell flat. It just, it's not, you know, that was actors, ex athletes who are retired because you couldn't be active as an athlete and sell beer. I don't think you still can to this day. So they had to be retired. Um, and that was a campaign about retired classic athletes. And a few comedians, Rodney Dangerfield, Joey Piscopo, thrown in for Bob Euchre was a little bit of a comedian and a very, very ordinary baseball player, but a genius at comedy, um, who just left us not too long ago. And I had the most fun with Bob Euchre than anybody. But it's interesting. I had the most fun with Bob Euchre and Billy Martin, two very strange and unique personalities. Um, so it worked, and from there, I mean, I have a list of the celebrities that I've worked with, and it's so vast. I look at it sometimes, and I'm amazed. Most times it worked. Sometimes it didn't, but most times it worked. Now, would other people have that success? I guess, but I had the opportunity, and I made the most of it, and it worked for me. Um, Now I see actors who are pretty much athletes who are pretty much trying their hand at acting, and some are glib, some are subtle, some are funny. In fact, I think for me the best male athlete actor on the market is Baker Mayfield. You know,
Yeah.
he's
Yeah.
just got a sense and style of comedy and theater that works. A lot of them are scared to death. You can read it and you can't wait to get it, go home. But they certainly have changed the face of advertising. You don't do, I mean, again, two commercials, another athlete, another bunch of athletes. I saw one last night with the three caballeros from the Oakland Thunder and, paying tribute to X stars, uh, older stars, and it just marvelous. It just and that could have been one of our, I didn't call them alumni commercials. I don't know what I called them, but it was the group. Whenever the group was together, so it was a category that I got lucky in, and I did, and I loved because I connected with athletes in a way that I never thought I would. Um, and and then again, and then there were celebrities who were not athletes. There were the celebrities who thought they were bigger than commercials. The athletes all loved doing the commercials. They made extra money. They never saw themselves on television before, other than in a uniform. And but there were a lot of them who I will not give you names because I still to this day, there are celebrities, actors, female actors that just were too big for their britches, and and I had a hard time with that. So
Yeah. Bob, as we talk, you had an opportunity, and we talk about culture. You know, the Thriller album is the biggest selling album of all time. On that
is that
album,
true? Is that true? It
yes, yes,
remained
yes,
number
it is.
one.
Yeah, yeah, still is Thriller. A lot of great hits from We Know Michael Jackson. You directed one of my favorite songs on there, Beat It. And I was just looking at YouTube. I don't know if you noticed on YouTube, they got a new 4K. They've kind of like redid it where it's 4K version. So it's nice and even nice and crisp than it was before.
No, I haven't seen that. I should, by
Never
the way,
seen
because my version is old.
it. So go look at it. It's on YouTube. It says 4K. And I'm just watching that, man. It is you talk about a piece of culture. I mean, this is, people just hearing this that wasn't even born when you shot this know that spot and know that song. But that was your first music video?
It
Beat It?
was. I was. I had a producer from London named Anthony Payne who contacted me and said, I know you're riding high as a commercial director in Hollywood and all that, blah blah blah. But there's a new form, as you may or may not know, called the new station. There's a new channel. There's a new called MTV, and there's a new art form or music form or marketing form. It was a little bit of all
Mhm.
called music videos. Um, who would you like to? And I said, I'm happy making television commercials. I don't. I have nobody I want to. You know. He said, well, I'm going to go out in L.A. I'm going to try and get a meeting with Michael Jackson. I said, what? I mean, the guy, the young guy with his brother screeching and jumping around and having a, what do I? He said, well, he's no longer that young guy anymore. He's now a 25 or 6 year old, and he's terrific. And he just released this album, and you should watch Billie Jean. And or you should listen to Billie Jean. And I listened to it, and I said, wow, this is incredible. I'd love to do this, but it was already taken by an English director, and they had made that video. And what next up was Beat It. And somehow Anthony got to his two agents and called me and said, come on out to LA. And I did. And we had a meeting. And I met with Michael and we talked about concept. And I said, I got an idea for Beat It. And now here's where it goes wrong the way media has it. Media, in all the years, has continually said that I was inspired by um, West Side Story. Nothing's farther from the truth. I loved West Side Story music and played it when I was in college. Loved the original. Didn't care for either one of the films, but I loved the show. But that was not what was behind my Beat It. What was behind my Beat It, and I can relate to the story of let's not think we're so tough. Let's solve the problems another way, is what really is at the heart of Michael's Beat It, was that when I was growing up in Patterson, it was tough guys versus tough guys. And at the end of the day, we weren't very tough at all. I mean, we'd run. Nobody wanted to get hurt. Nobody wanted to die. Nobody wanted to get injured in a fight. So I remember those days of posturing. And so Beat It to me is about posturing. Here's this one gang led by Michael Peters, the marvelous choreographer who choreographed Beat It, versus the other gang led by his boyfriend, Vince Patterson, who he was living with at the time. And the dance was just glorious. It was 2 days shoot. CBS paid for it. I think it was $200,000. Actually, I'm sorry. I think it was $100,000.
Oh,
2 days.
wow.
Today, that's $1 million. If that, it's $100,000, and we scouted a warehouse in the barrio of LA, as the end scene and had other places. Um, we decided to shoot the dance on day 2 and all the auxiliary stuff, the ancillary stuff on day 1. Michael decided the last minute that he wanted to include the members of the Crips and Bloods.
Hmm.
And whoa, yo, Michael, I don't travel in those circles. I don't know how to get to the dudes. And I don't think that's a very good idea, but you're Michael, and if you speak, we listen, and we have to deal with it. He insisted. I love your concept. I love it, everything about it, but I want to include, for authenticity, some Crips and Bloods. Okay, it's up to you to get them. He got them. It's up to you, and we got the police to make sure everything was fine, especially with Crips and Bloods there. And we're in the barrio, we're in the warehouse, and we're shooting the pool room, which is close by, and an apartment, and the streets, and the sewer, all of that. And then break for lunch, dinner, because it's nighttime. At dinner, a couple of Crips mess up a blood, and there's a altercation. And the head cop comes to me and he says, Bob, I'm sorry, but this is no good. This is not good because these guys don't like each other, basically, and these guys are not to fool around with. And I can't take a chance with talent like this put in danger. So I like you to rap, and we'll worry about what happens next. And I saw my life flashing before me, my very first video. I was going to shut down. And I said, I'll tell you what, officer, give me one shot at one thing. I'd like to, I wasn't planning on it, but I'd like to play some music and see and do some dance, which I wasn't planning on, and neither were the dancers. But let's see what will happen if there's some music and dance. Give me one take. If it doesn't work, you got it. We'll wrap. If it works, let's keep going and see what we can accomplish tonight. And only because he and the cops wanted to see Michael Jackson perform, did he say, "Okay, you got it, one take." And I screamed to the Dick. I remember Dick Ashley, AD. God bless him. Dick, get everybody ready. We're going to dance. He said, "What are we talking about? We're dancing tomorrow." No, we're dancing tonight. And get them the switchblades, and the switchblades were rubber knives at that time. And get the sound over here and playback, and the playback is going to be loud, and I don't care what the neighbors say. What are they going to call the cops? And we got the cops here. Let's just get it done. And get Michael ready. He's good, but we're not Michael Peters, but we're not Vince, but yes, we are. So everybody gets ready, scurrying like everybody is. Michael's in makeup. I see a forklift just sitting there in the warehouse. And I said, "Who can drive this?" Nobody. A Teamster. The Teamster's got to be able to drive this. And so a Teamster comes forward and says, "Yeah, I can drive that." "Okay, get on it. Michael Peters, you're going to stand on it, and that's going to be your entrance." He said, "I've never stand. You're going to stand on this, hold on to it, don't fall off. And once it gets moving, you're not going to let go anyway. And just come on up. And then when it stops, you jump off and you're ready for a rumble." And Vince, let's go. Get ready. You guys are going to meet. And Michael, dear sir, you're going to get on top of the boxes. And you're going to come down with that wonderful style. And we're going to get into it. And we'll pick it up from Eddie Van Halen's solo. And here we go. Roll it. Roll it. And they roll it. And I say action. And what happened before our eyes is magic, just magic. Because if the one thing those guys can do, those actors who played gang members, is dance. And one thing Vince Patterson and Michael Peters and Michael Jackson could do is dance. And they danced. And when it was over, I looked at the cop and he says, "Okay, keep going, keep going. Okay, take number 2. And I go over to Michael and Vince, Michael Peters, the gang leaders, and I give them 2 switchblades that I purchased that day.
Real ones? Real ones?
I mean, now I don't know from switchblades, but if you ever use one, you ever handle one, it's a lethal weapon. It's a scary mother. I gave it to them, and they said, "What are we going to do with these? You're going to use them. Be careful, don't hurt each other." And I walked away. And from that point on, they danced with real switchblades, and you could see it in the video how they stayed away from each other. We did about 7, 8 takes, and I know directors, don't always tell the truth. A lot of times they say, "Gee, I didn't know this was going to be so good." When you saw what I saw live, you knew that we had something. We knew we had something. And the beauty of it was finally that the Crips and the Bloods, who portrayed viewers on the side watching separate gangs, watching what was happening, who was going to win the knife fight or whatever, I saw their faces and I whispered to the cameraman to shoot them. Don't let them know, but just shoot them. Their faces were unbelievable that they witnessed something that they could say to themselves, we may be the toughest asses in town. We may be the baddest asses in town, but we can't do that. We can never do that.
Wow, that's what we talked about. It's interesting, we talk about this. That was a cultural moment that happened, and you saw it and you knew it was special. It's something so often now we try to manufacture these cultural moments. You know what I mean? We try to make it happen, and you can't. You just got to have that life experience. Like you were saying, you pulled a story way back from here, and you applied it in your work, and from that, and then just this these gang members and all of that kind of created a situation for something to happen, and that's how culture really happens. And I think now today we're just trying to manufacture it, and it just falls flat. It's not authentic.
Yeah, it's obvious that today's technology has overtaken today's concepts. I mean,
Yes,
there's no question. There's no question.
of course.
I mean, I was always afraid of that. I'm from the McHoly Nagy school. Form follows function, but that's an old,
Mhm.
that's an old pattern. But the idea of a thing in the advertising business is always the most important thing, not the execution, but the idea of a thing. I'm overwhelmed today.
No, no,
I'm
no.
in the minority today. So
For the people who may not know who Michael Peters is, if you watch the video and you see the gentleman in the white who's dancing in the face off, but you can tell he's the choreographer because very rarely do you see somebody dance better than Michael almost. And
I,
he is, oh God, Bob.
yeah, and
Woo.
he, um, God bless Michael. Nobody dances like
Yeah.
Michael, not even Fred Astaire. But Michael Peters, that's the first time that Michael Jackson didn't choreograph his own work. That I was there every day, every hour. That was Michael Peters' choreography. That was the beginning of pop lock. That was the beginning of street dance. The beginning of it. Again, timing, luck, timing.
Have a look. But Bob, you're the luckiest director. But you can't exclude talent. The Bob,
Uh,
okay, I want to talk about one of my favorite movies you did. That's Dinner Rush. Oh
all right.
man. That Dinner Rush, first of all, you shot it in your wonderful restaurant, which I love. I didn't get a chance to go there this time when I was in New York, but I love it. But Dinner Rush with Danny Aiello and
Danny?
again, one location. Casting is superb. The narrative is superb, and the surprising twist. I
It, it's, again, I'm probably more influenced by commercials and everything else I do in that I love a setup, a conflict, a journey, an arc, and a surprise ending. That's my favorite, and that's really more a short film format. And it works, and it worked in that film, um, but very much influenced by Danny's character was very much influenced by my experiences. Of course, there was no murder in our restaurant, but seems like there could be every night. Um, and some of the scenes down, which many chefs have said, and I still believe to this day that the bear has used um, exclusively as an influence. That kitchen rocks. It rocks with Latinos, and they fire and knives and in pots and pans flying all day long, all night long. Um, so I got a script from two writers in Chicago called Dinner Rush, and I liked it, and they came to me because of my ownership in the restaurant, my in the restaurant business, my involvement, and plus being a director and all that. And I couldn't get it mounted. I couldn't get it off the ground the way I liked. And so I sat on it for a year, and then I went to them and said, I'll tell you what, I'll get this made, but I need to do a rewrite, not just a polish, a rewrite based on my experiences, and I'll shoot it at my restaurant. And I think you'll like it. And they said, yeah, go for it. Go. We'll all have a good time. And I went and I took the script and I did a complete rewrite based on my experiences in Tribeca and the Italian restaurant, Gigino Trattoria, of which I'm my own. And I got Danny. And once you get Danny, and Danny always remembered that I put him in a Lowenbrow commercial when he was a struggling actor in the beginning of his career. And he always felt he owed me. Danny's another Goomba that comes from Jersey who's got those, I owe you kind of. Danny, once Danny's on board, the rest is easy because everybody respected Danny's talent. Danny was a fine, fine actor with a brilliant voice. And, right from the television series Sex and the City, John Corbett and Sandra Bernhardt, the comedian, and others, the young actor, Eduardo Ballerini, and just really a really nice New York cast. And we took 3.5 weeks and made the movie and nicely edited and completed, and it caught a wave and people liked it and very much, and boom.
If
And
you
there
have
we have another chapter in my life.
another chapter, I'll just say anyone who haven't seen Dinner Rush, see it. It's really great. I mean, it's on demand and whatever. You can get that now. So, Bob, where are we now? You got Giraldi Media. You got other directors working with you. Um, what are we doing now? I mean, one of the things. Oh, you shared. I wanted to say this to you. You shared your new short, Jury of Our Peers, I think that's the title of it. Wonderful, really wonderful. And that ending again, as you talked about your arc, and just that ending when that, I don't want to give it away, but when that reporter comes in and asks the question, and it's just stopping right there. I'll go like, what's gonna happen? Man, that was classic. So I just want to applaud your work that you did that with
Thank you.
students, or
Every year in my program, we have anywhere from 12 to 20 students, like I said, mostly international, and their role, don't forget, it's a 1 year course. It's
hmm.
not a 2 year course. It's a 1 year course, which is one of its reasons why it's popular. And they are to make their own professionally made narrative short film. So Chinese students come to New York for the first time, Saudi Arabia, France, Italy, wherever they come from. They come, and few homegrown people, and there we have a collection of people whose responsibility is to make eventually, in order to graduate the 1 year course, a 12 to 15-minute short narrative uh, film. In the first semester, I have our screenwriting instructors write a short film. And jury of our peers was based on a story my daughter told me. One of my daughters owns a Airbnb, a large home up in state New York. And she told me, she said, "Oh, I had an interesting a bunch of tenants this weekend. A jury of a year ago came and had a reunion, and they had a great time." And I said, "A jury had a reunion? I mean, they like each other enough to kind of like celebrate and come a year later to have a reunion?" She said, "Yeah, they had a great time, whatever." I said, "Thanks, Teresa." And I went and I said, "What a nice idea." So I gave them an idea, and they set out and did a screenplay based on a jury have a reunion. Only for our purposes, it took place in New York City because the students are all invited to participate in this production. Some behind the camera, some in front of the camera. Extras, roles like script supervisor or helping out, lighting department, helping out grip department. But I direct it. We cast, again, legitimate actors, some famous, a high profile, and editors, professional, everything, music, finishing, all professional. They participate half by doing something and half by viewing. So they have experience on the streets of New York watching a professional team 2 days, always 2 days, shoot a 15-minute short film. And it works wonders and helps them say, okay, now I'm going to go in the second semester and do mine. Oh, that's the way he talked to an actor? Oh, that's what happened? Oh, the cops came here? Oh, they told me, oh, this broke here. This is what you do in that case? So that experience of a professional rubs off on them when they do theirs. So it works. So that's how I come to be a director. And every year it runs the festival circuit. We don't, it's on television. It goes, I do the same things I would do with any, short film, and I own it. I participate in producing it with the school. We own it together.
Good, good, Bob. Bob, man, it's one little question. We're getting ready to wrap up a little bit, but God, it's been so great. I mean, your work is in museums, and you know what I mean, and all of that. So you really just done such legendary, iconic work. I want to ask you this question. You know, you've learned a lot. What did you have to unlearn? You know, is it anything that you had to unlearn?
Oh yeah, oh yeah, oh yeah, oh yeah. We all have to unlearn, especially for directors. I think we all have to unlearn. We all fit into a little bit of the same category that it's not about us. It's about the story, and it's about those who react emotionally to the story, not about us. And we can do all the barking we want and all the yelling we want and get me this coffee all day long we want and go do my laundry and do this and all that crap that directors, because don't forget, as a director, I'm like, I don't want to use an analogy to the president, but
Yeah,
I can do and say anything
yeah,
and it gets done.
yeah, yeah.
And it's not about that. It's not about that at all. It's about for me now, it's more about teaching and learning than it is most about anything. But it's about not about me any longer. And if it was about me too much in those days, I'm sorry for it. It's part of a growing process. And there are those that'll say, what a bastard he was. And there are those that'll say he was a gentleman and he got what he wanted. Yes, we have to get what we want, but along the way, it's not us. It's what it is, what we get, who's it for. And that's something that we directors should go to class on. we should take a class on that.
Bob, sir, I
I
was
thought you were going to ask me about what I would like less and what I would like more in
okay.
life.
Okay. Well, let's talk about that. So, what
Well,
what would you like to see more and less of? What
less. I'll start with less. I would like to see less of Peyton and Eli, uh, because every place I turn, anywhere I go, Peyton and Eli are going across the screen. And something you're familiar with, the All-State campaign mayhem, I'd like to see a lot less of, because a campaign that started out original and somewhat funny and relevant has turned over the years too long to be mean-spirited. And so I'd like to see less. And turning into, and on the serious side, I'd like to see less guns and less people who pretend that it's about the Second Amendment when it's really about health and safety. Um, you can't sit and watch young people, kids, get killed every couple of months and not realize that has nothing to do with, a 250-year-old declaration that you have the right to arm yourselves. So I'd like to see less of that.
okay, cool.
More, I was thinking about more because we all have a lot. What we want, what we want, what we want. I would think that watching a sunset would be something we should have maybe a little more of. Don't forget, as a director of film, I watched a lot of sunsets. I filmed a lot of sunsets in a lot of places, and they're all beautiful. Even though they're different, a sunset in Colombia is a whole lot different than a sunset in Los Angeles. But it's still beautifully lit. It's still a place to sit with a glass of wine or a beer and just relax. And finally, I'd like to see more talk, less scrolling and and scribbling and watching and talk. We used to be able to talk as an artist, handcraft stuff that we did, do, make. Today, technology seems to be on the verge of taking over all of that. Some of it great, all of it? No, please give me a break. So I'd like to see a lot more talk and handcraft.
Wow.
Thank you, Lewis.
Thank you, Bob. I mean, that's it. That's the sunset of this episode right there. No pun intended. Bob, sir, I want to thank you so much. I'm just so excited, man, just to talk to you, just to see you. This is going to be absolutely great. You're spectacular. Your work is spectacular. You still doing what you're doing, and that's what this episode is about. We're creative people. We still want to make magic. We still want to make a difference. We'll never stop doing that. So
Thank you, Lewis. And
thank
it's
you.
you are, I want to say, for a record, I've worked with a lot of interesting people, and you are absolutely at the top of that list. So
Thank you, Bob.
thank you, sir.